and they left that situation and did have trauma, that's okay too.
That's true.
And that neither one of them is wrong.
No, you couldn't be more correct about that. And it's a support network that really pushes you to the right direction. If you don't have that, and you got guys, and you walk back into the station, and they're making off-color comments like, "Ah, good job, killer," and all that. That's a really bad thing, by the way. But that's
Yes.
how
Yeah.
but that's kind of our culture on some level. That's how we treat each other most of the time until it's a critical incident. And a lot of guys don't understand that when a critical incident happens, that's when all that kind of stuff has to stop.
Hey everyone, it's Christina and Daniel Deffenbaugh with 1042 Project, and welcome to episode 13 of the Shared Voices podcast. We are back today with Chris Hoyer, and he's going to just continue sharing his great stories. And again, we're going to include the link of his book, When That Day Comes. And we'll also include his contact information in the description for every platform we post in, so you can reach out to Chris as well. So we were just kind of chatting with each other, and Chris, you'd shared that there's kind of a funny story that you were wanting to share.
Yeah. So when I had about a year on the department, I discovered what they call the neighborhood enforcement team. And when I had about 4.5 years on, give or take, I got to that squad and never left. It was like the greatest thing ever. Proactive squad. We got to do all kinds of neat stuff. And so fast forward to probably my 14th or 15th year, something like that. These are the days of the beginning of the outer carrier style vest that we wore. And oftentimes what I would do is I would just be wearing jeans and a t-shirt, throw my outer carrier, even sometimes in a marked car.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular day, got my jeans, got my t-shirt, and back in those days, when I was still working, by the way, I'd carry my big 45, my Glock 21 in my vest. And I just had like a little clip on there, and I would just keep it in there, and it was perfectly fine. Not the safest way to do it, for a couple different reasons, because God forbid you get shot in the gun, it could splinter out, and a lot of guys don't like doing it that way without some kind of armor protecting it and whatever else. And because it's so exposed, it's just another way for guys to grab onto it or what have you. So, but that's how I carried it for a while. But I also had my little Glock 30 behind my back, and I carried that as my secondary, or my third, if you will, because I also had my rifle. So this particular day, I'm in a marked car, and we see these guys, and they're just begging to get stopped. And there was like 4 dudes in this truck, whatever, and pull them over. And I've got several of my buddies because I'm like, hey, I got this thing going on. I follow these guys around for a while. Finally, get this truck stopped, and I've probably got about I think I've got 3 other patrol cars, so probably at least 5 or 6 officers there that are on the scene. In the bigger picture of things, it really wasn't a big thing, if you will. But in the meantime, when I see this whole thing going on, it looks better than what it ended up being. So what I did was I unclipped my 21, so I could access it quicker if I needed to, kind of thing. So I unclipped it to make the stop, and we go up there doing our thing, talking to the guys, and end up grabbing the driver out and hooking him up and putting him in handcuffs, and ultimately put him on the other side of the truck on the sidewalk. So the truck is probably 3 or 4 feet out from the curb, and the driver sitting literally at the driver's door with both doors open. And you can probably see where this is going, right? So the other 3 guys are out of the truck, and they're all in handcuffs as well. All my buddies are over here talking to them. Luckily, thank goodness, because they couldn't see what was going on. So I'm looking right through the driver's door, through the passenger door, and I can see the driver sitting there looking. We're literally facing each other. And so what do? I go to lean down to look under the seat, and where does my Glock go? Boom, right out of my vest, smacks the ground, louder than it could possibly be. Hits the ground. I'm like, oh man, nobody saw that, right? And luckily, except for the driver, nobody else saw it. So thank goodness for that. So I secure it. I get it back in there. I finish my search. I don't find anything in the truck. But the guy's got like a couple different things going on. So I've got enough to take him to jail, tow his truck if I want to. And so I go around the other side, and I'm like all deadly serious. I stand him up, and I bring him up to the front of the truck. I go, hey, dude, I go, you know that you're suspended or you're whatever it is. He goes, yeah. And I go, I could tow your truck because of this and this and this. He goes, yeah. So I'm like, I look around like this, real serious. I go, I'll tell you one thing. I go, if you do me a favor, don't tell anybody you saw me drop my gun. I'll let you go.
I love that.
Bust out laughing, and I started laughing. I'm like, "Oh, dude," because that happens. I mean, it just does. It's one of those things where you're like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
are you kidding me, dude? For real? With like 15 years on, and this is how stupid I am." Right? So, and I did. Sure enough, I kept my promise. I unhooked him. I'm like, "Just go on your way. Just wait for us to leave before you go do anything else." The whole time
Yeah.
he's giggling. I'm going, "Oh, dude." And just like I said, thank God nobody else saw that happen. So,
You should tell the details of as many as you can about when you shot your vehicle, the
I shot the
floorboard.
floorboard of my car. Yeah,
Yes.
that was well, I was well, number 1, I had about a week left of probation where they can just fire you for looking silly. They don't need to have any reason. And, yeah, we were sitting up on the square, and we were towing vehicles off the square for something. I don't remember what it was for, probably snow ordinance or something. And, one of the officers I was working with at the time got a brand new SIG handgun, ankle gun. Of course, another ankle gun. It's always the backup guns, man.
Get you every time.
Yeah, and so we're parked. We're parked window to window, parked in opposite directions,
Mhm.
chatting while we're waiting for this vehicle to get towed. And he's telling me about his gun. I'm like, "Oh, let me see it," because I wanted to get a new ankle gun. So he handed it to me in his holster. And as I'm grabbing it in the holster, the gun falls out onto my lap, and I'm like flopping around with it. And as I did, it goes boom,
Oh
shot
my
right
gosh.
between my legs,
oh,
it into the floorboard of the car, which is a very loud sound.
I bet.
And the officer looks at me and goes, "What was that?" And I said, "You know what it was?" Yeah, and, the tow truck driver, um,
Oh, yeah, what'd he do?
his truck was so loud and was beeping, he didn't even hear it go off, but
Oh, that's good.
I didn't know what to do. We're a few blocks from the PD, and I hopped out and told the tow truck driver, "Hey, we gotta go." And, we took over to the police department, and I pulled it into the Sallyport area and started digging through the carpet, and, yeah, there's definitely a hole there. So then the thought process starts going like, um I gotta own up to this or cover it up. As opposed to my first thought, like this, I'm scared to death. My wife at the time was pregnant. I got a week of probation, and I'm
It
looking at it, and I'm like, I can't. There's no way. This is
I
not who
know.
I am. So I actually called my sergeant who was at home and woke him up because this was that night. It was like 2 in the morning, and I woke him up, and I was bawling.
Oh.
I was man. I had a year of probation. I thought I was getting fired, and he actually came to the PD. He got up and came in, and I didn't tell him what happened until he got there. And then when I told him, he started laughing and said, "You woke me up for this." And granted, I got in a little bit of trouble. I had to write some paperwork. I had paperwork I had to do and stuff like that, but it
Yeah.
worked out. Yeah.
that's funny.
I've never lived that down, Chris, as you can
Oh,
only imagine. But hey, it happens.
dude,
Luckily, it didn't hit my
I got so many stories about stuff that I don't even want to talk about. I will, but I'll
not
deny
when we're recording.
it.
Those
Yeah,
stories are my favorite.
Uh,
Stories like that and like what you shared, Chris. It's just
because people always, they see cops out on the street and they have an image in their head of who they think we are. But my gosh, we're
yes.
just people, right?
Exactly.
We
Like
drop things just like everybody else
it's the
do.
funny side of your humanity, and it's
Yeah,
quite
it's
funny.
just magnified when you got a uniform on and there's a gun
Yes.
involved and it goes bang.
Oop, nobody saw that, right? You walk into the door and you freaking smack your face on it, and everybody's standing there looking at you, going, "Can you read this as pulled, dumbass?" No.
Most first responders got their nickname because they did something stupid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had a few
Hey,
as you read there, so yeah.
Yeah. I like that one from the book. That was a good one that you just told. I like that one. All right. So anyway, now that we got that out of the way, we
that
needed a good
I
laugh.
enjoyed that. Yeah, no, that
Yeah.
was good.
But yeah, this is episode 2 we had Chris on. Chris is back again.
Yeah, part 2.
Yes. And last episode I really enjoyed. This episode, let's go ahead and we'll just jump right in where we left off, Chris.
Cool.
Um, you had when we left off, you had just had your first shooting,
And his second. He covered his first and his second.
first and second shooting, and so you're off of work. So you're off of work for a while after the first shooting, I imagine. How long are you off work before you're back on the street?
Well, again, like I talked about, where I thought it was a good plan in place, it really wasn't. But both of those two shootings I got involved with happened on my Monday, and so my 3 day
Mhm.
weekend had just finished. I get into shooting on Monday. I get 3 days off for the investigation, and then my weekend rolls back around again. So technically speaking, I only had to work 1 day out of 9. Technically, not even a full day. So um, I kind of joke about that on a really morbid way. It's like, hey, if you're gonna get into shooting, do it on your Monday, and you get all that extra time off.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it's Friday, then it's already yeah.
Time it
Well,
right.
they've all changed it now. It used to be 3 days. Now, my old agency, it's now 30 days at least as a minimum. So, which is actually pretty good, but that's a whole nother conversation. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree on the longer term one. As fast as you went back, to me, that's pretty flipping fast, man.
it was quick. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and then you're right back in you're right back in wearing your uniform and
yeah.
right back to routine calls again, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, 100%. Which, a lot of guys, that's what they want because they want to get right back at it and have, that the ability to get back on the horse, if you will. Um,
Right.
which, when you're young and, kind of, full of piss and vinegar, that's what you think you need. And then you realize it's like, well, maybe I do need to take some time to process this thing whole out, and take some time for me, and that's what I learned um, in my third shooting. Which, if you guys want to talk about that, we can get into that whole thing. So,
Yeah, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
of course,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that
Yeah,
one was my poor partner at the time, Scotty, just a rock star. This guy was like 6'3", 230 pounds, solid muscle. He was just a beast. One of these overachiever guys, he's like a pilot, speaks Spanish, and all this great stuff. I'm like, okay, dude. And plus, he's just a big muscle guy, right? So, and just the kindest guy you'd ever meet. So he'd already kind of heard about my little shenanigans before he ever joined up with me, and it wasn't very long. I think we were only together, it could have been 8 months or a year when this one happened. And so we're driving, we're out in the middle of the southwest valley of Arizona, and we're not even in our city because we're out doing something else, and we're driving back into town, and it's right around lunchtime, and Scotty, of course, being a big muscle guy, he wants to go eat. And I'm like, well, hey, there's this call just came out. This sounds like something, and even though, yeah, I was not self-proclaimed, but I was labeled resident ship magnet, and now this being my second precinct out of three, which happened later on again, so I was 3 for 3 with that one. So
Man.
I'm like, yeah, sounds like a pretty good call. We should probably go on that. Okay, so we're zipping down the freeway. We get off, and we're heading east. I get off and go right back around. Now we're heading west, and I swear, 2 seconds back into the gore point of the freeway, there goes our bad guy down the freeway. Scott's like, oh, here we go. So off we go, and we followed this guy for probably about 10 or 12 miles. And the way that my old agency did it was they had a pretty good plan in place, which I don't disagree with. They would try to wait for the guy to go to ground with a helicopter and then just jump him when he gets out of the car. Saves a lot of lives. It's a lot less dangerous. So what we did is I think we had at least 3 undercover cars following this guy. Okay, cool. Let's
Mhm.
just track him until we can get out of town, past the next local airport because we don't have any air support going through that area of town. So helicopters come and they're like, all right, as soon as you guys get past this section right over here, then you guys go ahead and bring up a marked car, light them up. And that's exactly what we did. So as another officer came up, gets in behind this guy, and if you can picture, he's driving a flatbed Ford F550 truck, which is a pretty good sized truck.
Yeah.
So he's zipping down the freeway, doing whatever, and the story basically was the guy got disgruntled for whatever reason, sees his truck running in a parking lot of a gas station, jumps in the truck, takes off. All right, so it's a garden variety stolen. We don't really okay, whatever. So we're just going to try to get this guy stopped as efficiently as we can. Officer lights him up, and I think my personal thought is he took too long to back off because he kept his lights and sirens off for about a good 60 seconds, which is a long time. Um, and now he's like literally chasing the guy, and finally he backs off and lets the undercovers take over. And Scotty and I are probably a good quarter mile behind this guy. We've pretty much got most of the traffic cleared, even ahead of us, as it just turned out. And I see this guy go all the way from the number 1 lane all the way to the number 4 lane at about a 45-degree angle, at least 70 miles an hour, hits the back end of a tanker truck semi. And his plan was he wanted that thing to hit and then roll, blow up, take us all out of the fight, which almost worked. And as
Wow.
soon as I saw that, man, I'm like, ugh, breathe. You know, I told Scott right then, I said, dude, get your gun. We're going to shoot this guy. So Scotty and I are both rifle operators. So Scott gets in there, charged up around, and now it's just, the cat and mouse game. So we went for another at least 35 minutes, right? And in that time, when we drove by that first semi guy, I looked up and I could see him, and his eyes are about this freaking big. I mean, just saucers. And luckily, he was heads up. Instead of hitting the brakes like you would instinctively do, he hits the gas, rights the trailer, and keeps on trucking down the road. All right, cool. So we're gonna keep on going. In the meantime, he ends up taking out at least 20 other cars, including several patrol cars with this giant truck. Makes the attempt to run 3 more semis off the road. And the very last one that I saw, as we're coming by, the rear end of the trailer is still up in the air, bouncing like this. And I'm like, oh, dude, it's getting bad. It's getting pretty scary by this point. So we get up to another freeway. We're heading south, and then he turns back left, and now he's heading eastbound. And now, if you can picture, it's all like wide open farm fields everywhere. You can see for as long as you can see. So we're heading eastbound, and we're zipping along quick. We're doing probably 85 or 90 miles an hour, trying to keep up with this clown. And from my left-hand side coming southbound, I see the worst thing I could possibly see, which was a school bus. I'm like, oh, this is going to go bad. Because I've already seen him try to take out all these other cars and trucks and everything else. He's probably looking at that thing going, oh, it's like a freaking Red Bull to a cape, or a red cape to a bull, right? And so the school bus driver sees all the line of patrol cars and sees this guy flying. He's not stopping for any of the stop signs. And she stops on the side of the road. And luckily, the guy just blows on through there. Fast forward, he goes around through another area. There happened to be a fatal accident several days before in the area that we were in. And so there happened to be an officer from another agency working traffic control in this intersection, because what happened was the stop sign got plowed over. They hadn't had a chance to come back and fix it, so the officer's out there doing traffic. And he's a motor officer, and he joked about it later on. He goes, dude, I'm a motor. All I needed to do was put my hands and tell the guy to stop.
That's all you guys had to do in the first place.
Yeah. And I remember seeing, when we came by, all I remember seeing was the bottom of this guy's boots, because he's running through the freaking desert. Because this guy came up with that truck, full speed, and just hits his bike and just completely demolished it. Just destroyed this motorcycle. Goes out, goes back southbound, takes off again, blowing through all these intersections and whatever else. And we're out in the country, so it's not that much traffic, luckily, as it turns out. And in the meantime, what I had done, because I had seen all these guys that were ahead of me, and I had the thought process of, man, you know what, I'm going to slow down, and I'm going to hang back about a half a mile. And when this guy crashes into the desert and rolls that truck 3 or 4 times and gets out and runs, because he's going to survive it, I'm just going to run him over, which almost happened. So the guy goes south, and for whatever reason, he makes the impromptu decision just to flip a U-turn and to start coming right back toward what ended up being the first patrol car in line. With this big old truck, goes head on into that patrol car. And that officer sees it coming, trying to get the thing into reverse, can't do it in time, gets hit from the front. And as he's getting lurched back, pulls up his rifle and puts one round through his own windshield into the windshield of the truck. And I was like, holy cow. And if you go back and you look at the seat of the truck, had a center punch right through the center of the headrest, and the guy just leaned over just at the right time.
Wow.
So when that happens, 2 other detectives that happen to be helping us follow this guy jump out, and they start putting rounds into this guy's truck as well. So if you can picture, so this guy's about a half mile south of where we are. I stop on the side of the road, and both Scotty and I disembark on the patrol car, and we're both in uniform. And we can see all this carnage going on from way down the way. We can't really tell, is he shooting at us, or we shooting at him, or whatever else. All we know is we hear a lot of gunshots being fired. We're like, this sounds really bad. So we're outside the patrol car. Scott goes to the very front. He's about 10 or 12 feet in front of the patrol car. I'm just outside the driver's door. And dude, we are in like no man's land. There is no place for us to go. There's not a tree. There's not a culvert. The only thing we have for protection is our patrol car. And here comes this dude in this, whatever freaking 14,000 pound truck at we estimated about 60 miles an hour. And we talked about it later. I said to myself, when he hits that street sign, if he doesn't stop, I'm going to light him up. Well, 8 or 10 yards down the way, Scott said the same thing. That other sign where he was, he said the same thing to himself. He goes, if this guy doesn't stop before he hits that sign, I'm gonna light him up. So that's exactly what happened. The guy comes zipping by us at like about 60, and we paced it off later about 28 yards away. So I'm standing outside the patrol car. I'm just waiting for this guy to turn on me so I can just hit him with the freaking rifle, which isn't going to work because that's not going to stop the truck. It might stop him from barreling into us on purpose, but he's not, the vehicle itself's not going to stop. So my next best plan was, okay, when he drives by, I'll put as many rounds into his door as I can. So when he gets a Scotty sign, Scott puts 7 rounds in the guy's door. He gets to me, I put 9 rounds through his door, which ultimately stops the threat, if you will. He basically just kind of rolls to a stop, probably about 250 yards up the way. And of course, Scott and I go run to each other. Hey man, you good? You good? Because we don't know if we've been shot, we've been freaking run over. I mean, we can't really tell at this point. So we check each other really quick, and we hightail it down to where the truck is now stopped in the next major intersection. And the guy's rolling around. And remind me to send you, because I got part of this on video too, by the way. It's not from the body camera, but it's from the news chopper.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They got most of it on video, which is kind of cool. Except for when they get to me and Scott, and then they pan out, you don't see us shooting, and then they pan. I'm like, dude, come on, whatever. So the dude ends up stopping. Another guy from another agency comes up and basically blocks him in from the front. He gets out of the car, bails out, and goes for cover. And so now we get up behind this big giant truck, and then we fan out to the rear and start making a plan. Well, luckily we had a canine on scene, so we just let the canine guy. We're like, hey, you probably have the best option of what we can do here. Let you make the plan. So the idea was we're just going to walk up on the truck and just send a dog in, just either dead check this guy or pull him out, kicking and screaming or whatever else. And so once we get up to the truck, we realize that we can't get the dog inside there for a long list of reasons. And so I come up on the passenger side. I'm like the third guy in line. One of the guys opens the door, and I'm holding on to it when they start trying to pull him out of the truck. And they kind of let the guy go for the reason I think they thought the dog was going to come in from the other side. They didn't want to be part of that. And I already talked to the handler, and he goes, oh, we're not putting a dog in there, as we're walking up on the passenger side. So I'm pretty much the only guy there with the dude, and he's leaned over to the passenger side of the truck. So I basically take my rifle, I put it to his head, and I start giving him commands. And whole side note to that story, some sergeant comes up behind me and grabs my rifle barrel and pulls it away from the guy. And we had a colorful conversation after that. I'll just say it that way.
I bet.
So he pulls me off the dude, and the rest of the team comes up and they yank the guy out of the car. They get him on the ground, and the fight's on, of course. And he's been shot multiple times, all with rifle rounds. And because we basically just peppered him right up the side of that door. And finally, we get him secured into custody and ultimately get bunkered off the scene and get sent over to, because we're so far out into the country, they sent out a MAC van, a mobile activity command van. And that's pretty much where we spent the rest of the next 3 or 4 hours until we started doing our walkthrough. I didn't talk about this with my first one, but anytime this happens, generally speaking, most agencies, at least the larger ones, they're going to make you do 2 walkthroughs of the scene. One with internal affairs to make sure you're all within policy and all these kinds of things. The other is going to be with homicide, because now it's clearly potentially going to be a homicide because you just shot somebody. And so you got 2 walkthroughs of the entire scene and tell your story at least twice during that particular time. And so in between time, when this guy's doing the walkthrough, we're over here eating pizzas and whatever else, and then we get to go. And then finally, I think this happened at I think it was right around noon time. At finally about 7 o'clock, we got released to go home. It's like, holy cow, dude! But we can't take our car because our car is now part of the crime scene, because we got all those show casings all surrounding our car. Like, yep, you guys ain't taking your cars. Go get your phones and whatever else you need to get home, your car keys, and we'll give you a ride back to the precinct and we'll take your car back. It's like, oh, okay, which is kind of nice. So that was pretty much that. And that guy he didn't die on the scene, but I think he ended up dying a little while later, a couple of days or weeks. So
yeah. And so on that one, I mean, because you've already gone through them before. So on this one, you probably knew what a little bit more to expect. How was this? How was this one internally like compared to the last one? I know the last one it was very fast, high pace. Was this one any different? Did it bring back anything from the first one? You know what I mean?
Not at all. This one is a little bit different only because now I've got to make a plan, right? Where before it was more just on the side of being a reactionary thing. This one, I'm like, okay, what do I got to do here now? When I get to this guy's going to do that, and I've got to react to that.
Mhm.
But I had probably about 4 or 5 seconds or so to sit there and process through what's about to happen, and I knew this guy's not going to stop. So I pretty much had it in my brain already. I'm going to probably end up shooting this guy. And again, because my first two were with the handgun, now you step it up to the next level. Now this one's with the rifle, which was like even more strange because shooting a gun on the street's one thing, but then you crank off a rifle in a neighborhood, so to speak. It's like, holy crap, this is weird, man. So
Right.
uh,
Wow.
Yeah, that would be a bizarre feeling.
it's very very strange, and it only got worse for the next one. So yeah.
So, how did coping with that one go? Because again, I mean, I'm sure you felt happy to be alive, correct?
That one was actually very very easy, except for when we went to go do our debriefing with the city, because that's what usually happens. You'll have a critical incident debrief, like this, what we call the critical incident stress management, where it's kind of like you go in and you talk about things, your feelings, and what how you exactly what you're talking about here. How'd you feel? Are you sleeping and these kinds of things. It's about on average, usually about a week after, and then a lot of agencies, if you've got the resources to do it, they'll bring you back in for what they call the tactical debrief. Now you start talking about exactly that tactics. Why did you guys do this? And where were you standing? How many rounds? And what was your backdrop? And all these kinds of things that are all part of the investigation too, as well. But now it's a chance to just kind of throw everything on the table and just be open and honest about what you did or what you think you did wrong or what you did right and so forth. So for the first one, the critical incident stress debriefing, um, Scotty didn't go to it. And I'm like, Scott, dude, come on, man. I mean, it sounds bad. We just smoked a guy with their rifles, man. We need to talk about this shit. And he's like, no, I'm not going. Wow.
Wow.
And what I learned from that experience was, yeah, I was a senior guy. I had the most amount of experience at that particular time, but I still needed some guidance. And especially from a guy that you ride in a car with for 40 hours a week, I'm like, Scott, dude, come on. I mean, let's
Yeah.
go take care of this. And he's like, nope, I'm good. Well, and he was being selfish that way. I was being selfish too because it's like, dude, it's not really about you. It's about me. I need you. So I was playing the
Yeah.
selfish well. You know, and I learned that from that experience. And so I went, and instead of having an objective outlook on the whole thing, because I mean I've been through it before, no secret. I was very angry, and the whole thought process was, where's my partner? He should be here, and he's not here for this. And that
Hmm.
was my guidance through that whole process. So,
And how did that? I mean, and you said you and that officer are still friends today?
oh yeah, absolutely, oh yeah, and
Yeah.
he talked about it, and we got very close before that, and we remained close after. It was just one of those things where I got pissed off at the time, and I let it go. I'm like, okay, I understand why you didn't want to go.
Yeah. Everybody's
So
different.
different, yeah, different attitudes, different people. His perspective on what we did was different than mine, and so forth. Uh,
And that's why, it's interesting how we talk about this with a lot of first responders, how partners that work together can experience
Mm.
the exact same trauma event and experience it completely different. Where
Yeah.
one can have extreme problems. In one case, I'm thinking of lifelong problems,
Mhm.
debilitating problems that it causes. And then the other one can be like,
Like it didn't really affect them.
yeah, it was no big deal.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah, everyone's different.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. There's
Yeah.
no,
And there's no right way to do this, right?
I
Yeah.
agree 100%. And this is
Yeah.
this is where the other problem sometimes lies. That again, we talked about this in the last episode. But a lot of guys that haven't been through it before are telling you what you need to be doing and what you need to be feeling. It's like, dude, you don't know. You weren't there.
Yep.
Don't
Yeah.
don't tell me how I should be acting because you either A, haven't been there, or you weren't on that particular scene. You don't know what I saw or what I dealt with. So yes, I want your guidance, but tread lightly, please. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
first responders, we want to help everybody. So we try to help our fellow police officers too by telling them what to do or how they should feel.
Mm.
Boy, that's a big thing that I've had to learn in my career too is you can't tell anybody how they're supposed to feel or how
Right.
they're supposed to be handling something because when you do that, if they're not feeling that, then they feel broken. Like, wait, am I supposed to be feeling like that? Am I supposed to
Mhm.
be
Or defensive.
Yeah, and if, we all grieve in our own way, we all deal with trauma in our own way, and just because it's different doesn't mean it's not healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
And if a situation didn't impact somebody the way that it did the person next to them, that doesn't mean that necessarily there's anything wrong with that person
Right.
either. I think the strength is owning how you feel about it. Like you shared, Chris, in the last episode, when you walked away from your first and second shooting, and how did you refer to that? Interactive, when it was with a person? What word did you use there?
I'm not
Do you
sure.
remember?
Follow me.
But anyway, when you'd shot that bad guy that was in the car, and then he didn't end up living, but you were able to look at it and know that you did what you had to do, and you didn't walk away from that situation with trauma, that you had to work through, and that's okay. And maybe hypothetically, if you had somebody with you and they left that situation and did have trauma, that's okay too,
Absolutely.
and that neither one of them is wrong.
No, you couldn't be more correct about that. And it's a support network that really pushes you to the right direction. If you don't have that, and you got guys, and you walk back into the station, and they're making off color comments like, "Ah, good job, killer," and all that. That's a really
Mm,
bad, by the way. But that's
Yes.
how we.
yeah.
But that's kind of our culture on some level. That's how we treat each other most of the time until it's a critical incident. And a lot of guys don't understand that when a critical incident happens, that's when all that kind of stuff has to stop. And it's got to
Mhm.
be a different kind of an approach. Again, this is just my opinion because I've seen it on both sides, and I've been that guy. Trying to be comforting to the person, knowing how their personality is, and thinking that's what I should tell them, and end up being completely wrong. So
Mm.
Is there anything during those afterwards that you wish you would have had, or something now you look back and something you would have, um, a treatment, or is there anything you go back? Is there anything you wish you would have done differently, or do you feel like you were able to lay him at rest back then? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Or
no,
do, or have you gone through now and went back and like, man, I really should have handled it better. I should have done this. Like as far as your mental health,
You mean
and
like after the incident?
yeah, like after the incidents. Yeah.
those first three, I really didn't have any issues whatsoever. Because a lot of it was the first couple were like, okay, I'm brand new, I don't know any better, and I came to the
Mhm.
realization of dot dot dot, and then for the third one, it was like, okay, well now I've got some time under my belt, I've got this, very specialized skill set with the rifle. The guy made a decision that cost him his life,
Yep.
and just like my first one, that was like, look, you chose to do this. You knew what the consequences could possibly be. This isn't on
Mm.
me. And if I don't stop you, you're going to hurt somebody else.
Yep.
Right.
That was what made it really easy for me. I'm like, look, I'm probably one of the only few people in the world here at this particular time that can stop this from getting any worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
Man, you were resilient, buddy. Thank
yeah,
you for sharing that. That's a lot.
Mhm.
it was a lot, yeah,
Yeah.
and it was really great, and that was like my 15th year, right? And then after that, fast forward 3 years later, then everything fell apart. So
Yeah, and that's the big one. I think
that's,
we're, if you're okay with that, we're gonna save that for the next episode.
yeah, cool.
Um, yeah, the next one is, yeah, that's the big one. Honestly, that was a hard part of the book to even get through, like, because I was putting myself in your shoes, Chris, and, yeah, I'm just so blessed that number one, you made it through it, and that you are here, and you're able to share your wisdom.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and go ahead.
I learned a tremendous amount from that one about the things that I failed at myself, and how I could navigate through as healthy as I could, and then take it to the next level to help other folks get through their stuff as well. So, and it
I
wasn't
love that.
not an easy road. It's still not an easy road.
Right. And now you're able to give back to other first responders, and that's what I love.
Yeah.
I love that. I wish I would have had this book when I started my career. I mean, really,
Yeah.
it's as a young officer, that's what you want. You want to hear from a veteran officer who's been there, done that.
Mhm.
What
Like
it
you said, that huge difference that it makes when you're hearing from somebody that's been where you are.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, And I look back on my time when I was younger, on the department, thinking to myself, again, I'm like 10 feet tall. And how much do we need to know in that first couple of years? I mean, there's so much information, and how much it would, because like when I was in the academy, we had a guy come in and talk about his shooting. And my first thought was, that's a bunch of shit. That doesn't happen. And sure
Mm-hmm.
enough,
Mhm.
fast forward, a year later, I'm basically in his shoes. And my thought
Yeah.
process was, what am I worried about? Man, we're cops. We get to go kick doors and chase bad guys, and nothing happens to us. Yeah, but fast forward 18 years, like I was, and then all of a sudden you realize that that was a farce, and you weren't taking care of yourself, and now you're going to spend the next 2 years trying to recover from it all. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but
Dang.
crazy.
Wow. Okay. It
Yeah.
is, and I know, Chris, because I know the more you tell your story, it's the more you tell your story, the more you tell your story. So you tell it more. So I know, like a lot of times when I tell my stories, my story, it's over time. We when we talk about our stories, eventually you kind of become numb to it because we say it so much.
Mm.
But I just want Chris to understand how impactful his stories are. Like, those are big deals, man.
I appreciate it.
A lot of people don't survive physically or mentally from one of those,
Mm.
and we're only on number 3. And you're still wearing the uniform, and you're still fighting. And we'll go into the next chapter of your career on the next episode. But I think this is a good time to go ahead and close it out.
All
And
right.
I would really advise everybody, if they can, to tune in to next week's. We're going to dive into the call and the thing that changed him.
Sorry,
There's a train.
I live on the train tracks pretty much.
Daniel's face.
Oh man, I thought because there's buttons on our podcaster that make certain noise, and I'm thinking the buttons are just pushing themselves at this point.
Oh, that's funny.
We just sit and
What's
drink.
strange is, so about a mile down the road from where I live, there's an intersection where they blow the horn to go through the thing. Where I live, there's nothing here. There's like
Oh.
literally nothing here. I don't know why they have to insist on blowing that freaking horn every time they come by my place. It must be like the guy's mom lives here or something, and letting saying hi
Oh.
or whatever it is. But
Yeah, because it's so you don't know this. I assume because you're right next to the beach, you're by the train that goes along the coast that hauls
yeah,
people, correct?
yes,
Yeah, there's a train that
Oh.
goes all the way through
See,
there.
it scared you more than it scared me because I grew up in a town with an Amtrak station, so I am so used to hearing that.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
not.
did not skip a beat. Your face though. Daniel was shook.
I couldn't figure out what was happening. Anyway, woo.
Okay, moving on.
oh my goodness.
All right, go ahead and close us out here, and I'll try to avoid the trains.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us and tuning in. Thank you again, Chris, for sharing your story and being so open, honest, and transparent. And yes, again, we will include the link to his great book. Definitely read it. We highly recommend When That Day Comes, Training for the Fight. We'll also include Chris's contact information if you'd like to reach out to him. And we're just so grateful that you're joining us and spending time with us, listening to Chris's stories and, the voices that we're sharing and just building the supportive community. We're very grateful, and we'll catch you in the next episode.